Welcome to Piggypower. We're going to do a cam belt on this 1.6 16 valve HDI. So only attack this if you think you're competent and you've got everything you need to do it and you're confident that you're not going to damage your engine. First, I'm going to show you the tools you need for doing this job. Okay, quick tool breakdown of the bits you're going to need. You're going to need some drivers. A breaker bar is going to be a good idea, 1/2 inch with an 18mm socket. We've also got 16mm, 13mm in deep and long, 10, 8, 7, a T40, a T50, an E14, which is a female Torx, snips. We've got the similar sizes in spanners, which you'll also need, 13, 16 and a 15. Levers for the clips, a scraper and some Scotch-Brite for cleaning up a flange, some drivers for the sockets down here, definitely a pin, that's quite handy, that as a punch, as a pin, some pliers for a couple of hose clips, a torch, cheat gun, mirror and a pot, some WD-40 to clean up the flange, and then an arrangement of pins. You might have the official pins, or as you can see here, I have pins that I use for other stuff that fit in really sweet, or just an M8 bolt and some older little short bits of metal that will fit just nicely. I'll show you how to use those later. Other than that, obviously some way to raise the vehicle and secure it safely. So, let's get on. Oh, I've got a drain tray and some coolant and a cam belt kit too. That's probably quite handy. So, the first thing I'm going to mention is that I'll be doing the timing belt, but also the water pump, which is accessed via the timing belt. I'd recommend you do this as well, and it's a good time to change your coolant. So I've let it cool down, taken the cap off to make sure there's no pressure, and I'm going to remove the lower hose to drain the coolant out while I'm busy. This will hopefully mean that when we take the water pump out, we don't just get loads of gushings of coolant, which is uncontrolled, and it'll just go absolutely everywhere. Instead, we can control the flow, and we can drain it nice and safely. So we're going to do that. So while that's draining into our drain bucket, we know that then when we take the water pump out, there'll only a little bit to take out. So next thing you want to do, remove the wheel. We've already got it jacked up safely, supported on an axle stand. You'll need your jack later for under the sump, so make sure you put it on an axle stand. So let's get the wheel off and get this inner arch liner also out the way. This looks like someone's had a go at doing that once before and broken it, so that's nice. And there's a little clip up there, a little clip there, there'll be another little clip there, and we'll just peel it out the way. Nice. These clips are essentially like a 2-part clip. It's like an inner slice, and you want to try and flick that. As you can see, it's not that easy. Inner slice out first, like that. You see that? And then the clip will come out in one. Sometimes they split here, if not. Sometimes they'll split there too, just to that section. We just need to get behind here and just peel it back, or you could take the whole thing out if you're that enthusiastic. Be warned, half the countryside might come out, so we'll brush that aside and let's look at getting the auxiliary belt off. This vehicle might have a different auxiliary belt setup or drive belt setup to yours. Get a piece of paper or card and draw out the route of your serpentine belt, auxiliary belt, whatever you want to call it. Draw it out on a piece of paper, so when later you go to put it back on, you're not spending 5 minutes trying to work it out. The tensioner is that one there, middle of shot. Let me show you it from underneath. It's this one here. We're going to access it probably from underneath, because you'll notice there's a little hole and a pin that will line up with another hole and a pin. So we're going to turn this clockwise with a long spanner till those holes line up and put a pin straight through them. 15mm spanner. A long one is handy for this. You see we're basically, as we turn this, as it happens to be clockwise, takes the tension off the belt, which is handy. There's going to be a lot of tension, so be careful. Where is that hole? Oh, I want you to be able to see it. No! There. Right. So hopefully you can now see, get your light in there, there's that pin through that hole. Okay? Happy with that? So pin through hole, right up in there. Now that means we can now literally just flick off the drive belt, which is nice. So let's just lift out the drive belt so it's out of the way. You could replace it at this point. However, this one is actually in quite good condition. You just check that by seeing if it's cracked or perished, etc. Okay, so now that's done, we're going to try and make access for ourselves. So as you can see, this is basically in the way. So we're going to take that 10mm out and flop that over there. And then we can just see what we're doing. With a bit of light on the subject, we're going to remove the timing belt covers after the crankshaft pulley. But I'd just like to get myself ready, engine in position before I stake tightens apart. The engine, being able to move it up and down, is really handy for getting all the engine cover bolts. So this is where we're going to support the engine and remove this bracket here. There's 2 bolts at the back, 2 bolts at the front, and 3 that go onto this plate here. And then there's these bolts here, which go that way. So we've got Torx, male and female. We'll get that out of the way, but obviously you need to support the engine. So we're going to get ourselves a piece of wood to go under the sump, and then a jack on that piece of wood, or under that piece of wood, to support the engine in its position. So, looking for something like that, nice and pretty well supported. Okay, T50, male Torx, one of those. So then the engine mount, get out of here. So we're also going to get that bracket out of the way, which looks like 1, 2, 3 bolts. Is there one hidden underneath? Usually there is. Yep, there's one hidden and just there as well. There we go. There we go. They are tight. Fantastic design. See? Well done. Well done. I expect that will come out of the way once the our covers are out of the way. So we're just going to lift them off those clips. That should give us enough movement to get those covers off. Okay, so 7mm bolts for some reason. You often find the covers like this one on other belts are the same, they'll overlap. So there's a distinct order you've got to do them in, usually top to bottom. And that is the same case here, top to bottom. Okay, there's a little clip at the back there. That just keeps the engine loom attached to an inner trim, an inner cover. So we're going to flip that off. To hopefully give us some flexibility with this loom. Oh yeah, it's a nice warm belt behind there. Let's see if we can... Oh, it's so tight, that loom. It's ridiculous. Okay, and we can just wiggle it backwards and then wiggle it out. Okay, and there's our engine loom out the way as well now. And there's our top cover. Let's put that to one side somewhere safe. Okay. Alright, so as you can, it's usually the case with cam belt covers, is the cam belt lower pulley, well actually it's the drive belt pulley, but it's attached to the crank pulley, has the cover behind it. So this one also has another piece of wire attached to it, so we're just going to get our trim and clip that out of the way. You can in fact also unplug it to keep it out of the way and safe, but that might just keep the dirt out of the plug for now. So to undo this, it's an 18mm. You either want an impact gun for that, that's pretty critical to undoing these. Alternatively, you put a pin into the gap between the disc and the brakes here, a big bar, put it in gear, and you can undo it by hand or have someone hold it on the brakes, hold it in gear, and again you can undo it by hand, but you'll need a big bar. A gun is definitely the cheap method that I prefer to go for. So we're just going to lower it down a little bit more so I can get the gun in easily. There we go. Now, this is where, well, that was nice. Sometimes they'll fight you. Sometimes they will not. Today, it did not. Okay. And now, as you can see, we can get to all the other bolts to get our cover off. Yay! The very last engine cover bolt, because in their genius idea, they put a tensioner in the way. So we're going to get a Torx bit, looks like a 40, maybe a 35, something like that. Get our drive belt tensioner out the way. It's not going to be easy. That should be pretty tight. Oh, not too bad, not too shabby. So that's where that little pin goes in, as you can see, to line up. Oh, let's not lose that bolt. It's PSA. That cover should be loose now. There we go. Slide down through all the pipes and out of the way. Now, some of you might have said, hey, you missed one down here. I didn't miss one down there. Actually, it is the CAMBELT guide of some sort on these. We don't all have that, but this one does. And you're going to have to get it out of the way. I don't think it is also a 7. I think it's an 8. Oh no, it is a 7. It's just covered in muck. All right, let's get that off. I mean, you could have undone that earlier, but just so you know what it is. There we go. Don't forget to put that back in. And then we are going to use a 10mm to remove this, which is the sensor for the timing wheel magnetic. You don't want to damage this. It's not delicate, it's just, you don't want to damage it, is what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. 10mm. It's not tight. 10mm socket. Nice and deep. Gets it over it and done with nice and easily. Righto. We're going to put our pulley bolt back in just gently, because we're going to use this to then turn the crank around and line all our timing marks up and put some pins in. So I can see already it's actually gone past TDC, which can be a bit frustrating, but it's this hole there, and it lines up with a little hole from behind. It'll be much easier once I have actually done it to show you. So we'll do that. See, it's not torqued to spec until you see that little circular hole rather than the slotted hole on that timing wheel. It will begin to line up with a little hole behind. Okay, now I'll show you that now, nice and clearly. You should be able to see that right in the middle of the shot. I might even be able to get you a bit closer. Behind, there we go, you see that little hole from behind? That lines up just like that. Now, if it's at TDC1, and you got it right, we should have some other marks which also line up in here, which looks like we're 180 out. You see the hole at the top and the hole at the bottom, so I'd say we're 180 out. So I'm going to turn the crank one more time until that lines up, and if I leave you up here, you're going to see those holes move into place. She's got some good compression, that's for sure. Here we're coming up. Let's line that up. Oh, might have gone just a bit past. Let's just bring her in. Oh, nice and gently. Too far. Nice and steady. Okay, that should be there. Now you could use all sorts. You could get an official timing pin set, which is fine. I have a few different timing pins these days that line up, like that one. But you could also just use some M8 bolts. So that's just an M8 bolt. As you see, goes in just fine. You don't want an M6 tiny bolt, you want a bolt that's going to be nice and tight. Gets in there nice. And now there's also one which I'm going to send you down to see with the camera, but there'll also be a hole in that wheel which lines up with a hole behind to keep that in time as well. So I might have forgotten to mention this. If you've got your cam timed up and your crank timed up, but you go to your water pump, your fuel pump, and the mark doesn't line up, it's about 12 o'clock, which is kind of where my thumb is there, not where it is now, which is like 4 o'clock. Then you need to continue to rotate until all three line up. It takes about 6 rotations from one perfectly lined up to another. So try 2 more rotations. It's probably going to be 4 from this point to get up to TDC, and then all the pins will match up as I have shown in the past, or I'm about to show you. Not quite sure where I'm putting this in the video. But there we go, that's why this is out of phase. So you need to get it into phase by continuing to rotate the engine by hand until all 3 pins slide in nicely. Yep. Perfectly lined up, so we're just going to put a pin through that as well. And that pin looks a little bit something like that. You could use an Allen key of some sort, just make sure it's a nice fit so that it can't move a tooth basically, which you can see the teeth are a few mil big. So you do need a decent fit. It could be a bolt, it could be a piece of metal, anything, if you haven't got the real gear. And the cam timing pin in, you then should have at the top there, where my thumb is pointing, the hole to line up to put the pin in for the fuel pump. We'll slide in real good. If I can find it without seeing it. It's there somewhere. There she is. See, slides in real nice. There we go. You could use an official timing pin or a bolt of the right size, but make sure it's or a drill bit people use as well. I find them a bit sharp, but catch my hands on them. But a bolt of some sort, or an Allen key, or a stubby pin of some sort that fits nice in there, and we'll hold that in place. That's how you time that up. As I say, if it won't go, just keep rotating until they all line up. They should all line up. We're going to release that tensioner now, that bolt in the middle, and then when we do that, the tension will come off the belt, and the belt we can then, well, remove. Usually 13s. Oh yay, it is 13. You don't need to get this bolt all the way out for the tension to come off, by the way, just to pre-warn you. Just needs to be undone. At some point very soon, you'll just see it relax. There it goes. Now if it doesn't relax fully, after you've undone this bolt or loosened this bolt off, then you can put an Allen key drive into that and turn that so the tension comes off properly, which I might do now just to demonstrate. Timing pin is so slick, it's fallen out. So let's just get an Allen key in there. Get that 6mm in there. So you can see that will tension it, and that takes the tension right off it. Okay, and then pick your location and start pulling at the belt, and you'll find somewhere there'll be a nice slack point. Sometimes it's the bigger pulleys, sometimes it's the smaller pulleys, to be able to pull the belt off. Oh, there we go. Right, sorry for knocking you about. Okay, and you can just work it round, getting your belt off and out of the way. Just be careful with that magnetic ring at the bottom, you don't damage it. And that, CAMBELT off. You're nearly halfway, I would say. I'm going to now remove this and remove this, because it's in our, I would always replace the pulleys, and then we'll go to removing the water pump. So 13mm, 16mm, get those pulleys out of the way. First, let's get the tensioner off. Usually in a kit, it comes with a new bolt, but don't throw it away, just in case. It's always worth comparing that the new bolt is the same length as the old bolt as well. 16mm here, get it square on. There we go. It won't be mega tight. Yeah, there we go, finger tight once it's undone. It's probably about 30 Nm or something. That will slide off. Right then, 8mm. Let's do it. Now water is going to come out. Just pre-warn you right now. Water is going to come out. Even though you've drained the coolant system, there will still be some water behind there. To this point in this guide, I'm going to say, look, if you're watching this and you know how to do this and you're just here to criticise, go and watch something fun like Slow-Mo Guys or Colin Furs, or I don't know, just do something better than just sat here watching me do this when you know how to do it better than probably I do. Yes, you probably can do it better than me. Max, Darren, you know who you are. A little flick on that water pump and she'll pop right out. Ready? It's been leaking too, actually. Oh, I can get a little flange. There. Doesn't need much. There it goes. See that? Told you a bit of coolant would come out. Actually, a lot of coolant came out. Well, that's fine, I'm catching none of it. So the next job I were doing, and I'm not going to record it because it's a very boring job, is we'll have to get that gasket off, like that. And that was the easy bit. Then we need to then blade that off, clean that up. So, let's do that and come back later, and I'll show you how good it can look when it's clean. All right, hopefully now you can see a nice clean flange on the block where the gasket used to be. Using a blade and then a little bit of Scotch-Brite with some WD-40. Cleans it up nice without damaging it. And you want no remnants of the old gasket. New gasket, usually metal, could be paper. Make sure the gasket matches the water pump, which it does, just lining it up. And also make sure that this water pump matches your old one as well, so you're not trying to fit something old. So we're going to try and screw it in now, obviously. Now the tricky bit with these gaskets tends to be that they want to fall out, so you can't put the gasket up and then offer the pump up. Offer the pump up with the gasket. Have one of the bolts in your hand, line it up, slide it in, just make it, give it a start, and then do the same with another one. You should be able to release your hand then, and then start putting the rest of the bolts in. Water pumps, I often use my little short stubby, or just with your longer ratchet, just hold it further up the handle, just so you don't play as much torque, because they're really not very tight. Well, they don't need to be very tight, and I expect the usual thing will happen is if you over tighten them, probably just pull the threads out of the block or snap the bolt off, and you'd be in trouble and have a leaking water pump. That's why there's so many of these, is to give a nice even clamping force so you don't have to drive a couple home really tight. Okay, I'm happy with that. They're all nice and even. Check them over, and the next step will be replacing the pulleys up above. Okay, so that's our two replacement pulleys in. You'll notice at the back here there's a little nubbin on the block that the slider for the tensioner has to fit on, so it obviously doesn't move. So when you tension, there's something to lever on, and there's still its pin in place. You'll pull that out later on. So we've just nipped that one up. That's 30 newton meters, and this one is 37 newton meters. When you go to do the final tightening. So our idler pulley is tightened up, 37 newton meters. Left hand one just nipped up because we'll loosen it in a second for the tensioning. So we're going to check that the timing pins are all in place, and then we're going to fit our timing belt, starting with the crank, then with the idler, then cam, then fuel pump, then tensioner, then water pump, in that order. You'll find that's probably the easiest way around to get them on. Either that, or you go crank, idler, cam, fuel pump, and then get it onto the water pump, and then slide it finally on to the tensioner. It's quite tricky with the water pump one sometimes because they're tough to do that last. Sometimes it's easier with a smooth belt, but you'll find a way. But you've got to do crank to cam first, and then across the water pump, not the other way around. So you're fitting it anti-clockwise. Always check that your old belt is the same as your new belt, or your new belt is the same as your old belt, in length and in width. And if there's no writing left on the old one, just put them both on a nail or a screw, stretch them out, and that saves you having to count all the teeth. Because you can sometimes be fighting a new belt on and realise later on it's 2 teeth too short and you're never going to get that on. So here we're about halfway into getting the belt on. It's fully round the bottom crank. It's almost completely on idler. It's about 70% on the cam, 70% on the water pump, 50% on the tensioner, and sort of 20% on the water pump. If you put it all the way onto one, or like sort of 2 or 3 pulleys, you'll never get it on the final one. I also had to take the pin out and slacken that bolt just to let the last bit of tension out of this so I could get the belt on. There was no chance otherwise. So just some top tips from me, how I get belts on. But it has to be absolutely taut between the crank and the cam to make sure the timing is correct. You can't be a tooth out. You'll have some running issues. So what I will do now is push the belt basically on the rest, and we'll go to the next step. Our next step of the process is to turn the head key, or Allen head, there in the middle of the tensioner, turn it anti-clockwise until the little pointer is in between the 2 sliders, and then we lock it off. So we turn it anti-clockwise, rotate it round, and the little slider until it's there between the 2 markers. I'll try and show you that on camera. If not, I'll have to do it, and I'll show you the result afterwards. So we're going to turn it anti-clockwise, and you're going to see that pointer, see it moving, until she's in the middle, like that. There we go, whole lines up with the slider. It moves around quite a lot, quite easily. And then I need to get my other hand in there to tighten up that 13mm. You have to play around with it a few times, because as you tighten it up, it'll adjust it as well. But that's where you're aiming for. So the next thing we're going to do is pull out our timing pins, and using an 18mm socket on the bottom, we're going to rotate the engine 6 times, and then recheck that this tension is in the same place. And our timing marks, or our timing pins, all go back in the same spot. Okay then, with 6 rotations, our timing pins have all slid straight back in again. The reason you have to do the 6 rotations is because this wheel is not in sync with these 2 enough to only do 2 rotations. So 2 rotations and the cam and crank will be be able to pin it. 2 more rotations, that's 4 in total. Cam and crank you'd be able to pin, but not this one. Go around to 6 again, and we can once again time up the fuel pump. So there you go, there's the answer to, well, that's why we do 6. Okay, so your next job is to check the tension is correct. So let's get our mirror, check our tensioning mark is in position, centre of screen right now. That looks absolutely spot on. So we're going to check the torque on that bolt there is 30 Newton meters, and then we're going to put our timing sensor back on. Don't forget that, pretty important, won't start without it. And then start putting our covers back on. Start putting our engine mounts back on, which are, if I remember rightly, 55 and 60 Newton meters for those bolts. Pretty tight things. Put everything back as it started. Tensioner back on for the drive belt. It's an automatic tensioner, so you just pull the pin and then start it and be happy with yourself. Final part you're going to need to do that I just thought I'd show you is this crank bolt. On these, sometimes, and I hope the kit you have, they provide a new bolt, which is nice because they are stretch bolts. You put it in just finger tight, and then torque it to 35 Newton meters, and then turn by 190 degrees. So let's see if we can get the 35 Newton meters without locking anything. I don't think it's going to go. Yeah, it did. Cool. Might go on the next one. There we go. As it comes up to compression, hear the click, 35 Newton meters. Great. However, we need to do 190 degrees, and as you can see, she wanted to turn. So there is a locking pin that goes into the flywheel from where the exhaust goes under the engine. If you have a look on your vehicle, you might notice there's no exhaust, which I don't know any of those without exhaust there. So you'd have to remove the exhaust, and you could be breaking studs and everything, and you have to have just the right pin and hope that doesn't snap off in the flywheel. Personally, I would prefer to lock a pin into the disc, have it in gear, and I'll show you that in practice now. We have a pin into the vented of the disc against the caliper carrier, not the caliper itself, but the carrier. Nice pin in there, that's not going anywhere. And then what we're going to do is, to be sure that nothing gets damaged, also then going to just put a wheel bolt in so you're not working against those tiny little bolts. And then we're going to put it in gear, and then as you rotate that crank, hopefully 180 degrees, you'll basically be holding it steady against this point here. So as I was saying, 2 chunks of 90, That's 90. I determine that's 90. I'm going to go for another 90 again. Oh, you're going to have to use a breaker bar, long bar for this. Okay. That's just, there we go, that's just past 90 degrees. So that is pretty tight. And you might need someone to help you to do that. Sorry if that didn't pick it up on camera, but that was 202 times 90 degrees plus a little bit for that extra 10 degrees of turn. And that is nice and tight to spec. Your final job is obviously to replace the coolant that you've lost. Ideally, you're doing a coolant replacement at this point, at which point I'm putting in neat red antifreeze first. I usually put about 3 litres, 3.5 litres in, and the rest distilled water. But it's important that whilst it's quite good at self-bleeding, it's not completely. So you take the inlet pipe work off, which sometimes is missing on these, but it goes from back there, runs into this pipe here, just clips out, you don't need any tools. And there is 2 coolant little caps. You see that? It's like a tyre valve. There's one there, and there's one right at the back there, right where the torch is pointing, which is the matrix pipe. So you need to bleed the system out. Basically what you do is you get that header tank full of coolant, unscrew one of these until there's a nice steady stream of water coming out. Unscrew it. So it'll only be finger tight, and you don't want to be using any tools on this. That should. There we go. Steady stream. Good. See, there was a couple of little coughs then. So we just wait a couple of them. You make it a bit of a mess, but there we go. And that's done. Now I'm going to try and do the same at the back one. I doubt you'll be able to see what I'm doing, but my hand needs to go back there. Unscrew it. You can also unscrew the reservoir. There's 2 screws, and put it aside, but probably won't really help. Taking the engine out would probably help. It tends to be, that's a bit tighter, that one. There we go. Need a full grip on that. I'm going to do the same thing until the nice stream comes out. Yep. You might have even heard that. I was listening as well as feeling the end of my finger, and I was listening for it burping, and once it had stopped burping, I could feel on the end of my finger there was a steady stream. Did them both back up, and that's how you bleed the coolant system. All right, and as long as you do that and there's still coolant in that reservoir, you've bled it. If that reservoir is emptied, you might have to just repeat that process. Notice I've also got the car jacked up on this side just to give us a little bit more help, keep that header tank as high as we possibly can. And there we go. Then run it up to temperature, make sure the thermostat opens, the temperature gauge is okay, there's heating inside the car, let it cool down again, gently open the cap, make sure the levels are between a minimum and maximum, and you are done! Well done! You have succeeded at life today by changing the coolant, and perhaps other things. Well done! So thanks for watching Piggypower. If this has been useful to you, then great, I've done my job. Please subscribe, maybe, comment, but the best thing you can do is just share my channel with other people. So don't worry about subscribing or even liking. Just share this channel with other people and say, hey, this guy's really useful. That'd be nice. Don't attempt this job unless you're pretty confident already with some mechanical skills and experience. Only that if you get it wrong, you're going to damage your engine, and that's going to cost you more money than trying to save yourself some money in doing this job yourself. If you've got any questions, please put it in the comments or message me directly and I'll try and help you. Thanks for watching. I'm Piggy.